Have you ever really stopped to think about how we know what happened hundreds or even thousands of years ago? I mean, none of us were there. So how do we piece it all together? Well, let's get into it, because the answer isn't just about finding dusty old books. It's about being a detective. I want to kick things off with a statement from our source material that's, well, it's a bit shocking. Right here. This is the big, uncomfortable truth that every single historian has to deal with. The idea that the very documents we count on, the texts that tell the story of our past, are almost always flawed in some way. So that immediately leads to a huge question, right? If the written records are all shaky, then what are we even doing? How do we know anything for sure? Are we all just guessing? Well, no, not quite. What it really means is that to understand the past, we have to think like investigators. And just like any good detective, a historian knows that clues aren't all in one place. The evidence they use to build a case for what happened, it generally falls into two big categories. I want you to picture it like a historical evidence room. Over on one side, you have the archaeological finds. We're talking about the physical stuff that people left behind. And on the other side, you've got the textual sources, everything that was written down. Both are absolutely critical, but boy, do they tell their stories in different ways. So, archaeological evidence is the stuff you can literally touch. It's the ruins of ancient buildings, like this absolutely breathtaking city of Petra you're looking at. It's pottery shards, old tools, even bones. This kind of evidence is so powerful because it's a direct, physical link to the people of the past. A stone doesn't have an opinion, it just is. And that, of course, brings us back to that other kind of evidence, text. And this is where it all gets a little messy. See, while a piece of pottery can't lie to you about what it's made of, a written document, oh, it absolutely can. And this is where the real detective work has to kick in. Okay, so if written records are so tricky, how do historians sort through this massive paper trail? Well, they definitely don't treat all texts the same. They use a system, kind of like a hierarchy of clues, to figure out just how much they should trust each piece of evidence. And that hierarchy is usually broken down into 3 tiers. You can think about it like this. A primary source is like you seeing an event with your own 2 eyes. A secondary source is like hearing about it from a really good journalist who talked to all the witnesses. And a tertiary source, that's kind of like reading a big summary of all the news coverage a year after it happened. So at the bottom, closest to the action, you have primary sources. This is the raw material of history. We're talking about a soldier's diary, a letter from a king, a legal document from the time. These are the unfiltered, first-hand accounts. They're as close as we can get to being there. Next up, you've got your secondary sources. Now, these are created after the event is over, sometimes long after. They are works of analysis or interpretation that are based on those primary sources. So this would be a biography of that king or a history book about the war that soldier fought in. It's that first layer of analysis. And finally, at the top, you have tertiary sources. These are even more removed from what actually happened. Think about encyclopedias or textbooks or big databases. Their job is to collect and summarize information from a whole bunch of other sources to give you that big picture, bird's eye view. Okay, so we have this really neat system, right? Primary, secondary, tertiary. Seems organized. But this brings us right back to that big problem from the beginning. Even when we have the best primary sources in the world, we're still facing a major investigator's dilemma. Why are they so often unreliable? Well, the first problem is interpretation. No piece of evidence, I don't care if it's a letter or an entire building, it doesn't speak for itself. A historian has to interpret it. And because historians are human, 2 of them can look at the very same source and walk away with 2 totally different conclusions about what it means. But the second problem, this is the big one, it's bias. Every single person who ever wrote anything down had a point of view, a motive, a reason for writing what they did the way they did. The person who won the battle is going to tell a very different story from the person who lost. No text is ever truly neutral. So what's the verdict? Is history just a bunch of biased, unreliable stories we tell each other? No, not at all. And here's the amazing part. All this uncertainty, this unreliability, it isn't a flaw in history. It's what makes it a living, breathing thing. It's why we're always debating and revising what we know. So this all brings us to 2 huge takeaways. Think of this as your new historian's toolkit. First, you always have to think critically about where your information is coming from. Ask yourself, who wrote this and why? And second, you have to remember that our understanding of the past is never set in stone.
One new archaeological dig, one newly found letter can change everything we thought we knew.
So, in the end, history isn't just a list of facts and dates you have to memorize. It's a living, ongoing investigation. The story of the past is constantly being rewritten, reinterpreted, and rediscovered, which really just leaves one question. What are we going to discover tomorrow?